All right, chronic absenteeism, low test scores, a teacher shortage. These are just some of the challenges that face Detroit Public Schools. Our next guest is tasked with turning all of those things around. Please welcome Detroit's new school superintendent, Dr. Nikolai Vitti.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I haven't had a chance to talk to you since school opened a few days ago. I just want to get your reaction to how schools opened. Did we do okay with getting things started? And was there anything that you saw that you didn't expect to see on that first day?
No, all things considered, we had a smooth opening. We met with all of our principals before the school year started, went through teacher vacancies, textbook needs, facility needs. It's the first time principals felt truly engaged by the district for the opening. And all things considered, buses ran on time. We didn't abandon any children at stops. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a much better job with filling vacancies as compared to last year, but still work in that area. And right now, enrollment is trending positively. And if you look at the percentage of students that are attending school so far this year, after about 10 days, we're increasing the level that we were at 10 days in last year.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
all things considered, moving in a positive direction.
Anything shocking?
Shocking? No, I continue to be positively shocked at the persistence and resilience of teachers and
yeah.
principals and just overall employees in the district. After multiple emergency managers, after, frankly, mismanagement of the district, a lack of clear leadership at the district level, people came to work and continue to go to work to fight for children and to work with children. And there's an enormous amount of dedication there, which is not surprising, but inspiring, yeah. considering everything they've been through. On a negative side, to be transparent, is just an overall lack of systems. You would think emergency managers at the minimum would focus on systems development, and it wasn't clear that that was the case in all systems across the district. So the amount of rebuilding that has to be done because of the lack of proper leadership.
It's not just on the academic side.
It's across the board in just about every aspect of the district.
Yeah.
You know, I can imagine when you head to all of these schools and every community meeting that you've been through since school has opened, that everyone's got a little something that they want to tell you or a little something that they want to say. What are some of the biggest concerns on parents' minds as they go back to school with their kids this year so far?
Well, I think we heard some of that tonight. Safety. We can't even talk about academics if children don't feel safe. I hear that often. I hear about the need for programming across all communities and all zip codes. You talk about, I often hear the need for high schools in all communities, especially where we are at right now. Years of mismanagement, not engaging the community authentically has led to deserts in this community in particular. That has been an overwhelming concern. And just a need for arts and music and restoring of that is something I hear consistently. And lastly, to pay employees at a higher level to be more competitive. Those are some of the things I often hear.
All right, and you just listed off a good list of things. So then how do you sit and say, how do I categorize where I'm going to start first and start to tick things down the line and say, hang on, we're getting to that point. How do you categorize all that?
Well, one thing the school board and I have focused on is strategic planning. One thing that you can't move a district to another place if you don't have a clear set of, you don't have a clear vision, mission, core values, priorities, strategies, and metrics that go along with that. And we already went through a board retreat to define those things. We've already engaged the community with over 15 sessions, where almost 400 people have been engaged. In fact, this week the board will review the revised strategic plan and put forth to them for a vote. And that will really be our guidepost on where we're headed. We're going to revise our budget for 18-19 to drive that strategic plan. And many of the things that I talked about that were mentioned as needs are already embedded in that strategic plan as a draft.
The other thing I heard in all of those things is the cash register ringing up, lots of costs. All of those things you talk about are going to cost money, and money has been the thing that we've struggled, the most with here in Detroit in terms of schools. Can you open a school in a community like Brightmoor where you don't have one? And if you do, where do you get the money for that?
Well, one thing that we have to recognize is that money needs to drive priorities. We need to be transparent with how we use our dollars. We have to have line item budgets. We have to have revenue clearly articulated and expenditures clearly articulated, driven by that strategic plan, not done randomly, not done by politics, not done by who meets with the superintendent last or who meets with the school board last, but truly focused on children. So revising that budget, we've already started to do that. We'll continue to do that throughout this year to next year to drive priorities. And then after that, we have to know what the gap is as far as what we need to deliver to children. And that's where lobbying in Tallahassee and Lansing is going to be important. I always say Lansing.
Florida again.
I say that often.
Now,
But you know, the need for a weighted student formula is going to be important.
Yeah.
We have to get to a point where to educate a child in Birmingham is not the same cost to educate a child in Detroit.
Right.
And we have to see weighted student formula funding for poverty, for special needs children, for English language learners. Because again, if we're really about equal opportunity, then you have to fund public education appropriately. And then lastly, we have to have accountability with what we spend our money on. And that's been lacking in years previously in Detroit. Specifically for a school in this area, we're going to do a facilities review throughout the entire district, understand the gap between where schools are for facilities and where is the academic standard for 2021, understand the gap throughout the district, recognize residential growth declines, and then start to make some decisions in the next 2 to 3 years on where we build new schools, maybe where we consolidate schools, but to actually have a comprehensive plan so that every community has access to a K-8 and a high school, and students don't have to get on a bus to travel 2 to 3 hours in order to access school.
Yeah. Talk a little about how that weighted formula works where you used to work in Florida. They do it differently than we do here in Michigan, right?
Well, unfortunately, Florida and Michigan aren't much different when you look at pure
right?
pupil funding
Yeah.
throughout the nation. They rank 40th below, depending on the year. There was a bit more weighted student formula or funding for students that are special needs, but that's about it in Florida. Florida is by far not the model when you look at per pupil funding.
What is the model, you think?
Well, I think you look at places like Massachusetts, where you adequately fund public education for the most part. You provide extra resources for students with special needs. You're looking deeper for poverty, and you treat low-performing schools with extra support, not with penalties and sanctions in order to move the closure.
Yeah.
We're all parents up here on the stage. We've got a lot of parents in here. I know when I go into a classroom with my kids, I want to make sure that there's a teacher in front of the classroom. They've got the textbooks that they're going to be able to use, and that there's not an overwhelming number of kids that are actually in that classroom. Talk to us specifically right now what teacher vacancy number that you're looking at in terms of leveling classroom size where you're at right now.
Right, so right now we have 194 vacancies as of today. Last year, the district started with 276 vacancies. This year, we started with 250, plus adding 11 EAA schools, which were about 250 extra teachers. So apples to apples, we've actually improved. Over the summer, in only a month, we hired over 200 teachers. So we know we can recruit and retain teachers in Detroit. We just have to have a proactive strategy to do that. Last year, from January to the end of the year, the district only hired 30 teachers. That was last year. So this year, we're much ahead of that. We're leveling right now based on actual enrollment. Enrollment, as I said, is trending a bit higher than last year, so we're in a positive direction. Leveling means that schools that have an increase in enrollment will see an additional allocation. Those that decline will see fewer. And then we're going to look at class size. And that's something that we have to address within our budget. But it's really not necessarily a fiscal issue right now. It's a teacher recruitment issue, meaning we can add teachers to the budget, but if we don't have teachers to fill those positions, they just remain empty. Or vacant. We're not including long-term subs as full-time teachers, and we've only hired fully certified teachers. We're not lowering the bar in that area at all. We're still hiring fully certified teachers. I believe that this time next year we'll have a different conversation about vacancies. I think this summer proves we can recruit teachers. We just have to have a longer runway in order to recruit in advance and not scurry with only a couple of weeks, months before the school year started.
And you've put some more money into teacher salaries, but we still have a long way to go to be able to attract the people that we need, the people who you want to be here teaching, to come do this. This is still a tough job, and there's a lot easier duty available for less money around the state.
Well,
Or, I'm sorry, for more money. Yeah.
over the last 10 years, district teachers have seen reduction in wages. They've seen concessions. And at the end of the day, I believe that working in Detroit is the hardest school district to work in, not only in Michigan, but I would possibly argue throughout the country. So if you're going to be competitive about retention and recruitment, you have to have a conversation about salary. So as you said, for the first time in 10 years, we're increasing teacher pay. Teacher pay for beginning teachers will be more competitive, where at least we're at the top end of first teacher pay compared to other metro Detroit school districts and those that are more urban in nature. So that will make us more competitive, but we have to at least restore the 10% in the coming years, and then beyond that become more competitive in salaries. But beyond salaries, we have to create environments where teachers feel empowered, that they have a voice, that they feel there's more creativity in the curriculum. The curriculum is more culturally relevant, that it's more authentic, that we expand and restore the arts, for instance. I think all that will matter. Have to reduce class size, and we have to have principals that actually support teachers and not just look at punitive ways on managing teachers. And then lastly, we heard it in a video earlier, we have to improve our pipeline. So student teachers have to be placed in Detroit. We have to work with our historically black colleges and universities to have more student teachers placed in Detroit. A lot of our high school graduates are actually going into teaching in HBCUs throughout the country, but they're not student teaching in Detroit. So it's a win-win to bring them back here and have them student teach here and then hire them after that process. These are all systems and processes that we're going to start building to restore this district.
Let's talk a little bit about absenteeism. I mean, you can't teach a kid if they're not there in class. What do you plan to do to tackle that problem, and talk a little bit about that?
Well, one, we need better data systems. So we need to ensure that we're taking attendance every day, and then we're communicating with parents actively when they're not in school. There are data systems through phones, through cell phones that we need to maximize to communicate with our parents. And then most importantly, we have to create environments where students actually want to come to school every day. So there's a reason why they're not coming to school. They're not coming to school because the curriculum is not always a reflection of who they are and what they want to be. We're not offering programs like music, art, PE that actually excites students and builds their confidence and self-esteem for them to get into reading, math, science, and social studies. We have to make school exciting again, and not just about standardized test scores, but developing the whole child. We have to improve behavior and discipline. It shouldn't be necessarily punitive, but when children make a mistake, which we all make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, rebuild students so they feel loved and supported, not just penalized for making the wrong mistakes, but highlighting when many of our kids make the right decisions and rewarding them for making those right decisions. Those are all features, and I think aspects of school improvement that we have to bring to the culture of our schools to make school exciting and a place to go to, not a place to avoid. At the end of the day, if you don't feel valued, comfortable, and successful in what you do, you avoid it. It's human nature. And for a lot of our children, they don't feel successful in school, and that's what we have to do differently.
You've taken a really different tack to the public versus charter school question that has sort of swirled around this community.
I knew I wouldn't be here without a charter.
For 20 years, right?
There's 2 minutes left, and he's
you know, I got to give you credit. I mean, you really sort of turned the tables on that conversation, as opposed to saying, you know, help us out to the state or to someone else. You're saying, well, look, let's compete and we'll win. Talk about how that works. How is that going to sort of unfold?
So one thing that I learned as a leader and as a person is you have to control what you can control. You have to fulfill your own destiny. I can't, with a magic wand, change policy or history when it comes to charter school authorization. If I could, I would do things radically different. I would have set guardrails to ensure that people that created charter schools actually had a track record. I would ensure that charter schools that were created that were failures closed. I would have put caps on enrollment for charter growth, but that's all in the past. I can't change that. But what I can control is quality within the traditional public school system. I get paid every day to make the lives of children better within the school system. That's what I'm in charge to do. And if I feel if I do that well and we do that better collectively as a community, then children and parents will come back to DPS CD. DPS 20 years ago was one of the best urban school districts in this country. It was bad policy at the state level. It was mismanagement, bad leadership at the local level, mainly driven by policies at the state level that led charter school growth, but also children to leave this system. And it led to the deterioration of communities, here in particular. And so I can't change that, but that history and that legacy and that faith is still there. We have to actualize that and build off of that, and students and parents will come back. At the end of the day, the beauty of traditional public schools is that we serve all the time. And so if we deliver and show people and restore that faith and confidence, they will come back, and I believe this, and my children being in the system is a testament to this, is when traditional public schools get it right, they get it right better than charters, than private schools, and even, and as I said, private schools throughout this country, but we just have to get it right consistently for all schools in this community.
All right, Dr. Vitti, thank you very much for being here.